the topic of this panel is to explore some of the issues that have been raised actually in the discussion before, which is really to take a look at economics. And we called and the stories we tell about economics. So we called this panel New Climate Economics. Fatih Birol in the previous discussion said economic facts are very stubborn. Well, one of the things we're going to be looking at is how stubborn are these economic facts actually. So we'd like to start us off with a very short poll, which if we can have that up on the screen. And the question is, what is the likely impact of the clean energy transition on the economy? And there are 4 options. One is it will come at a net cost to the economy. The second option, it will be at a net benefit to the economy. The third option is this is not knowable. And the fourth option is I don't know. And in that case, you don't vote. All right? So, what does this say? Oh, that's rather interesting. We have about half of the people, so so about half of the people say it's a net benefit, and a quarter a net cost, and a quarter unknowable. Thank you very much. I think that's a very interesting input, and we'll have a discussion about that. And I'd like to welcome Cameron. I think Cameron can hear us already, but we'd like to see him now, if we can make that possible. Hi, good morning, Cameron. I'm so happy.
Good morning.
I'm so happy to see you for many reasons.
I'm happy to be here.
All right, great, welcome. So let me just give you the output of our panel. 51% said that it's a net benefit. Let's say half said a net benefit, a quarter said a net cost, and a quarter said it is unknowable. So can you give us your views on what is it actually that are these facts? What is it that we know about the economics of climate mitigation and adaptation?
Well, we do know some things. We know that this system, the energy system, like a lot of economic systems, has a huge amount of inertia in it. I'm sitting here, I use a computer laptop, it's got a QWERTY keyboard. You know, the top line says QWERTY. Now, why does it say QWERTY? It's not to speed up my typing or to make things more efficient, it's actually to slow it down, because that keyboard was invented at a time when we needed to stop jams in typewriters, and it's still here today in our laptops. So that kind of inertia exists in economic systems, and exists in a big way in the energy system, in the existing capital stock, buildings, power stations, infrastructure. If these all run to the end of their lives, you know, we're looking at probably over 2 degrees centigrade of warming already kind of locked in. So if we want to get over this inertia, we need extremely rapid innovation and a much greater investment in technology and R&D. And this is actually starting to happen. As Fatih noted, you know, these economic facts are very stubborn. We're 82% fossil driven at the moment. We were 82% 25 years ago. But the difference between now and 25 years ago is that the cost of cleaner technologies has absolutely collapsed and continues to fall at a really rapid rate. Just literally a few hundred meters from where I sit here in Oxford is a world-beating lab that's just had a breakthrough in solar glass. So you can generate electricity from sunlight coming through glass at a much lower cost and much higher efficiency than previous cells. So technology and research and development is key to this transition. But let me answer your question. What do we know about the costs? Well, there are a lot of organizations who will forecast how much this transition will cost, whether it will be a net benefit or a big net cost or whatever. And, you know, often I think these forecasts are difficult to really find credible. There's one forecast recently that by 2100, the costs of a clean energy transition will be somewhere between 2 and 12%. I simply do not buy the fact that it's not possible for clean energy to be cheaper than dirty energy by 2100. That's an incredibly long way into the future, and as I say, costs of clean energy are plummeting, it seems highly unlikely, or at least if you're going to express a range of costs, it needs to include a negative number as well as a positive number. So why is it difficult to get a grip on these costs? And the reason, as Roland knows very well, perhaps better than anyone, is that the economy, in fact, like the climate, is a complex system. And complex systems are very difficult to predict because they have lots and lots of different interacting parts, just like the weather. And there's the classic idea that a butterfly can flap its wings in one corner of the globe and change weather systems elsewhere. Those sorts of dynamics also play out in the economic systems as well. And with all the science and computing power that we have in the world, we currently can't predict the weather beyond 6 days simply because of the way the system functions. And indeed, you may have a question there on your tablets to answer about what you think we can do by way of prediction for the economic system as well. So it's pretty hard. And if it's not hard enough to just understand the existing system as it is, it's even harder to understand what's likely to happen when you shift that system in a really big way. And that's what we need to do. We need to make major changes to our economic systems, to our energy systems, and possibly even to our political systems, judging by the last discussion, but I mean, this is well known, if we're going to actually stop from frying ourselves. And I think all bets are off when you shift the system. And at Oxford, at the Smith School where I am, in the Institute for New Economic Thinking, what we're doing is both trying to be more humble about the possibilities of forecasting these complex systems into the future, but also within that humility trying to say some things that are useful, that give us some useful guidance. And one of the things that is useful is to recognise that the changes that we need to go through, they are really genuinely big. In economics, academic speak, they're non-marginal changes, and I teach a course on decision theory, and this is one of the things I teach. So to give you an example, maybe in the next half hour, my wife may start going into labour. I'll get out of here and run out the door. And becoming a father is a decision that you don't take lightly. It's a non-marginal decision. And one of the reasons is that your identity shifts. The identity before becoming a father and after being a father, you're different people. And actually, this shift in the economy is actually not dissimilar because we're changing the underlying shape and identity of the economy. It's hard to even know who the decision maker is before and afterwards in order to predict whether it's a good or a bad outcome. So it's pretty tricky. And even in the narrow area of environmental markets, history suggests that we get this wrong quite radically. Time and time again, the forecast costs of a transition to a cleaner world, once you unleash market forces, turn out to be vastly lower than people thought. Take the acid rain market in the US, there were cost estimates done of the transition. The market was introduced. Within a year or two, it became apparent that costs were 1/10 of what people thought they were going to be in advance. And that was just because we got prices into play, we got incentives working, and companies innovated, and new solutions were found. So I think humility is the watchword to kind of sum up. There is a lot of inertia in the energy system, but over the time frame of several decades, we know we're going to have to make this transition sooner or later. And it could easily be the case that with enough investment in innovation and research and development, the costs of cleaner energy keep plummeting, and actually the cost of the transition becomes negative rather than positive as most economic forecasters expect today. But I think those of the audience who said it was as unknowable, that's not an inappropriate and humble stance to take, although obviously we do need to pin down these numbers in some way or another, at least so that we can start to direct and to steer the economy gradually towards where it needs to go. Thanks.
So, thank you very much, Cameron. So I guess you would have responded to our panel with your heart by saying you hope it's a net benefit, but actually as a scientist you say it's probably unknowable. Can we just see the outcome of the previous poll? So we had 20 years, 7% of people believe we can forecast accurately 20 years out, 35 still 6 years, but actually quite a strong majority 1 year. So quite a sobering thought for those who are in the business of economic forecasting. So, yes, talking about economic forecasting, I'd like to give the floor to Claudia Kemfert, who's been, in a sense, at the heart, both as an observer and to a certain extent as a participant, of one of the most, I would say, grand experiments that we've undertaken in a long time. And many of the discussions that we had about, you know, is there net cost, net benefit, what are the relationships, and how does change really happen, are playing out today in the Energiewende in Germany. So I wonder whether you could give us you know, we see all sorts of contradictory statements in the media, is that it's terrible and it's fantastic, and I've seen that in your writings you do a fantastic job of unpacking some of those statements and giving a more balanced view of actually what's going on. So if you would be willing to share that with us, that would be great.
Sure, thank you so much. Thank you also for inviting me to be participating in this very important event. I really appreciate it. And I think the German Energiewende, how we call it, is a tremendous effort we have to take. I mean, it's what we call in German Herkulesaufgabe. We say it's a tremendous thing we have to do. But there are a lot of challenges. But of course, right now, also a lot of difficulties we have to see. So, what is a German Energiewende? It's that we intend to increase the share of renewable energy by 80% in 2050. That's the major goal. And in addition to that, we phase out nuclear power by 2022. That's fixed. I mean, we will phase them out, definitely. There's no way back. And that means also that the share of the other energy components, especially coal-fired power plants, need to be reduced as well. And that's the effort we need to do. And this is where I would say we have some difficulties right now, because as we already heard in the morning, we have a very low CO2 price, and right now the share of coal is increasing again, and that's not really what we want to see in the system. But, and I see we already have net benefits right now, and that I would say they will increase in the future much more than we see them right now. We have an increased share of renewable energy. It has been increased up to 25% already. Right now, the wholesale electricity price is extremely low at the moment, which causes a lot of challenges, a lot of problems as well, because we need to have gas-fired power plants in the system, because the whole system is changing. We not only will have renewable energy, we will need a decentralized energy system, which means also combined heat and power, gas-fired power plants in coupling with volatile renewable energy. And storage will play in the future also a very important role. We need to store also electricity, which we can do right now already by pumped hydro storage options, but in the future we need more longer-term storage options like hydrogen, like methane. We need to produce them also with renewable energy as well. Talking about costs, and we talked about costs previously, right now Germany is spending 22 billion a year for the investment into renewable energy. This is passed over the electricity price with the feed-in tariff system, which we have right now really a strong debate about. Is that a good system or not? We are paying 6.24 cents per kilowatt hour each consumer. However, we have very low wholesale prices for electricity at the stock exchange and the power market. This price decrease has not been passed to the consumer. We're still very high. We have had very high components on the electricity price, including taxes. So at the moment, consumers in Germany really pay a high price in comparison also to other European nations. But on the industrial level, it looks quite different because there is this very low wholesale price. Many of the industry companies do benefit right now. Talking about the benefits again, we have jobs created. It's already 360,000 people employed in the renewable energy sector. We don't have to forget the energy efficiency part. because energy efficiency is crucial in reaching the goals of the Energiewende. And here we have a lot of innovation, a lot of companies do a lot. Look at Siemens and all the others. And here we have already created 280,000 jobs in the energy efficiency sector, which is also an important part we don't have to forget. But talk about costs, we also always have to ask, what would it cost if we would not do the energy transition? What would it cost if we would not do it? And fossil fuel prices increase. We spend in Germany 100 billion a year only for paying fossil fuel prices. So we pay investment of 22 billion into renewable energy, but we pay 100 billion per year for fossil fuel. So I would say we need to do the investment. These investments create jobs, and at the end we have a net benefit, as also the audience see we will have in the future. Looking at the consumer level, and this is why we have a strange debate in Germany right now, many consumers do want the Energiewende still. Although there's a debate, a public debate, that there are so many high costs and there's a negative campaign going on. But the consumers in Germany say, yes, we want to have the Energiewende. Why is that? Also because in Germany, the people spend much more money for heating and mobility than for electricity. On average, they pay 3.5% of their total consumption for electricity. That's not peanuts, but it's not so at a high level that the people really feel much more affected than, for example, if the gasoline price is increasing or the heating prices are increasing. And here we have a huge debate about it, what's happening with those prices. At the electricity level, we don't see that so much because the people, some of the people, and the largest share even don't know how much they spend for electricity prices. It's still ongoing. So in Germany, you might see there's a strange debate. So I would agree there is a net benefit. It's difficult to, of course, to calculate the cost, but I would say, and this is what our calculations show, that the cost of doing not the energy transition will be much higher than the cost of doing the energy transition. Why? Because the cost of electricity producing from renewable energy are tremendously declining. We see the solar price declining, solar costs declining, production costs decline, and the fossil fuel will increase. But also we see the energy efficiency impact, because this reduces the energy costs. The less we consume on the energy side, the more we save, the less the cost. And this is, at the end, I would say, looking at the bill, a much better way in doing so. So we see net benefits, and I hope there is also a positive debate in the future about the energy transition, and that's from my side. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. So you know, as Cameron was coming out on the unknowable side, you tend, as a scientist, to the net benefit side.
Yeah, I definitely tend to the net benefit side, because, of course, there's always a range of scenarios where you can calculate in that way and that way. But right now, we already see a net benefit, but nobody's talking about it. We only talk about the negative impacts, and that's not the best strategy. But it's typical German, I have to say. They always complain.
It's not a German monopoly, I think. I would like to turn now to David Bresch, and but I mentioned it in my little introductory talk, and Cameron as well, is that the economy in that sense is a vastly complex interconnected system. And the unique thing I've always found about SwissRe is that it is one of the very few private companies that actually is forced to take a systemic view of what's happening in the world. Most companies, in some sense, as large as they may be as a shell, is only a component in a larger system. But the unique perspective that SwissRe often brings is, because it is in the reinsurance business, is to look at much larger and much longer term trends, not just to understand them, but really because that's your business. So could you give us a sense of what that looks like from the perspective of SwissRe?
Just to put things in, thanks in fact for having the opportunity to be here, but to put things in perspective compared to the economy, we're a small player. But I think we have a pivotal role to play. As we mentioned in the first panel, we don't yet put a price tag on carbon. So we don't put the price tag on the cause of the issue. And we try hard as at the end, a commercial player, but also within our industry, to put the price tag on the consequences. because that's the place where some people will feel it sooner or later. And so that element of bringing transparency about implications is something which is at the core of our industry. On one hand, obviously, in order to be able to charge for these challenges and therefore have a solid business over time, but even more so, we have a keen interest to keep the system in a shape we can play our role, we can play to our strengths. And we can only do so if some of these risks do remain insurable, do remain manageable. And that's why, and to bring it back a bit to the urban space, we looked really at a couple cities around the globe and looked at what can you do to really strengthen societies and therefore cities' resilience with respect to climate change, with respect to some of these challenges. We all know many cities are growing speedily fast, so there's huge development, and development normally, especially in coastal regions, does increase exposure to coastal risks, be it storm surge, hurricanes, and all kinds of issues. We could also look at others, but let's focus on those. And if you look at the numbers today, risks are non-negligible. We have seen it with Sandy, we've seen it with Haiyan again. So it's tremendous cost to our economies to bear. And just putting up one number down, in the 70s and 80s, it was in the order of the 10 billions annual loss burden on the natural catastrophes. Now it's on the order of 100 billions annual. We, as a global society, have to put to the table in order to cope with these challenges. And that's risk today. So our economic development will further increase that burden. And that's fair as long as we do that consciously and we really figure out what the implications of our actions are. And then if you look at climate change as an aggravating factor, it further increases that challenge. And put it in context, in a couple cities, we've really done the study, really simulating risks today, simulating economic development, and taking into account the poll we've just been seen before. Yes, we try to be brave and figure out what does a city look like 20 years from now. And then we also try to figure out how is the environment that city operates in changing over that time period. And what we see, most places, risks are order of increases 50 to 100% within only the next 20 years. And the main driver does remain and will be predominantly economic development. So we do shape the environment we're living in, we do shape the risk landscape we're operating on. We're in the Anthropocene, we just know that by now. And climate change is very uncertain, especially on these timescales, especially when it comes to local impacts. But it's absolutely, and that's what we learn as a second piece of these studies, it's an urgency not to sit and wait and learn it the hard way. It's an extremely important thing to think about what you can do today in order to better manage your risks on an urban scale. And the good news is, most places, 30 to sometimes even more than 50% of the risk burden within the next 20 years can be cost effectively averted by a basket of adaptation options. And the real challenge is it's no one size fits all. It's really specific to the needs, the situation of the city, specific to the challenges, and specific also to the culture. And that's the piece I really like, because it's also about the question what matters to us as societies, and what matters to a city as a group of people who have a shared common vision to get someplace. And to get someplace means taking risk, but also taking into account the price implications that type of risk-taking has. And we hope through our contribution in that space and ultimately through our core business ensuring many of these consequences, we do help put that price tag into the game, and we do strongly advocate it would make our game a bit easier would there be a price tag on the cost too.
Okay. Thank you very much. So at which point do you think, so one thing is pricing carbon, the other thing is that in some ways you as an insurer put an indirect price on carbon, at least on the consequences of carbon. At which point does that start to be an effective replacement of the cost of carbon, right? Just simply because if it becomes more expensive to insure your house on the coast of Florida, then that's kind of an ersatz to be for a carbon price.
Yeah. The short answer is far too late. Yeah. We will be so far down into on a road which leads to a corner. I cannot imagine how you can then even turn again. What all I've said, so that cities have an opportunity to grow, prosper, develop, and cope with challenges, including climate change, it only is true in a 1.5 to a 2 degree world. And for some cities, it will get very tough already there. I also mentioned we looked at 2030. This is a timescale which is longer than, say, the planning horizon of most commercial enterprises. Even our own business strategy is not a 20-year strategy, but we take 20-year issues and trends into account in shaping our strategy. And so 2030 is a timescale where city planners and some people on the policy scale probably see an element of taking actions with respect to these facts. But that's the point. And in a 4-degree world, I really, really wrestle with this challenge. Could we still provide a service?
Oh, thank you. Just before turning to cities and some of the questions here on this white device, I just want to go back to this core argument of economics between, we have 2 physicists and 2 economists in this panel, just to give you a lay of the land. But this intrigues, so on the one hand, we've got Cameron saying, actually, you know, we do not have enough understanding of the system with the type and the level of change that's required to be effective, so that our forecasts and many of those things really aren't worth the paper they're written on. On the other hand, and you've written also quite a bit about, you know, how we can model, and so you have a higher confidence. So why can't economists agree about this? I mean, you've got your scientists. What?
I wouldn't say there's a strong disagreement, but it's always that we talk about scenarios. I mean, what kind of assumptions do we take? And we see, I mean, clearly, and we were wrong, very much wrong, and also in 10 years ago when we said, okay, the cost for renewable energy will be quite high also in the future. We were wrong because the cost technology for solar, for example, has been declined tremendously. We didn't expect that. Nobody was expecting that. So Cameron is right in saying, well, it's difficult to really forecast, but the question is, so do we really need a clear forecast in order to take action? Or do we take action and see what's happening and also leave the market, go for innovation, the cost will decline, and then we go in that or that direction, but we cannot really forecast, we need to go this and this and this step. I know the Germans love to do that because they always want to see where we want to be in the future and what can we do in 50 years from now, but we simply cannot do that. But it's good to have a long-term goal. That should be clear, and that means emission reduction. That's the first goal. The second is energy efficiency improvement, and the third one is also to increase the share of renewable energy on a global scale as well. And the Germans will do a lot in order to bring the costs down. We will continue in doing that. That's good. That's a good thing. But on a global scale, other nations need to do more as well, and that's where we, I think, could also agree.
Yeah, Cameron, so why can't economists agree? And I think the reason it matters is because economists are so influential, right, on the public debate.
Yeah, look, this does matter, and I think Claudia's right, and to build on what she was saying there, I mean, the fact that there's deep uncertainty in the way economic systems may evolve doesn't mean you don't do anything. On the contrary, that uncertainty means that we need to take action to create options. And one of the best ways of creating options is pushing forwards on the research and development technological innovation side, because if we can bring the costs down of cleaner energy, then we've got more options in front of us. Now, I mean, the world owes Germany and to a degree China a great debt of gratitude in the Energiewende, because it has triggered a lot of the deployment of renewable technologies that has brought the costs down. And whether or not it's been kind of net in the Germans' narrow self-interest, it's been a phenomenally useful thing for the planet to have. So, I mean, the Germans can pat themselves on the back and consider it a contribution to global public goods, if you will. I also wanted to follow up something that David said. I mean, I think it's absolutely right that internal carbon prices are useful, and it's also right that they're nowhere near enough. I mean, if you just take the leading companies, I mean, Shell has its own internal carbon price, and you try to function on that basis, it doesn't get you anywhere near where you need to go, because we want broad coverage. So what you need to do is to take these leaders like SwissRe, like Shell, and get their prices into place, and then use that as a mechanism for putting pressure on governments to, in a sense, follow suit where the leading companies have gone and spread the carbon prices across the economy. Finally, one thing to say about the kind of the costs and benefits here is that my remarks were really about gross costs and benefits. So this is the cost only thinking about the energy system. There are massive benefits of going cleaner energy in terms of local air pollution reductions, health improvements, as well as all of the climate risks that we would be mitigating. We saw a couple of days ago that a big chunk of the West Antarctic ice sheet now looks like it's going to collapse, it's going to be unstoppable, and we're going to have about a 3-meter rise in sea level. Now, maybe there's something wrong with that science. It looks pretty good. It's by NASA. It's not going to happen in the next 10 years. It's hundreds of years away. But the point is that we are setting in train these risks that are irreversible. And there's a huge benefit in shifting to clean energy, quite apart from whether there are net costs or net benefits just to the energy system, of solving these environmental problems.
Thank you. Sitting here in the Netherlands, 3 meters sea rise doesn't sound like a great idea, but anyway. So there's a question here from the audience, which I'll start with Claudia. So one of the things we heard in the panel before and now again from the audience is, so, this is all very nice, but in Germany, CO2 emissions are rising, and, the one large-scale technology that was there in nuclear is being abandoned. So, how do you square that with the whole plan?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the challenges we are facing, because right now that was not the initial plan to increase the share of coal. It should have been decreased. And there's one reason for it, and we heard this in the morning, it's the collapsing CO2 price. The emissions trading system in Europe is not working well. We have an oversupply of certificates where the Germans could have done more in the past in order to improve the system, in order to set aside the large share of the additional emission certificates, but the German government didn't do that. So that's what they have to face right now, that this was the wrong strategy. And I agree that is really a negative signal to the world, that we are showing that the emissions are increasing, although they should decrease. But the nuclear phase-out is fixed. This will not change. It's also the question, when do we phase out the nuclear power plants? It's now 2022. It could have been 2025 or 2032. It doesn't matter, because we have to install the new technology, and this is renewable energy and energy efficiency, which is crucial. We are doing not much also in the energy efficiency part in the building sector and mobility. We didn't talk so much about it right now, but we need to improve there a lot on the insulation level of buildings. The mobility needs to be sustainable. I mean, we can look here outside and see what's happening and what could be done, but we need to do more, definitely there, I agree.
Yeah. So one more question from the audience, and I think it also refers back to the previous panel. I'll start with you and get the views then of our other panelists. One of the most extraordinary things I found about the Energiewende is, I think there was a poll in last December that there is an 80% approval rating across age, gender, and political parties, which is, quite mind-blowing for many other countries. And in fact, there's a 50% sense of the population across all sectors who think that the Energiewende is going too slow.
Yeah.
And, that's all fine. But why is it that, and one of the questions here on the device is about trust in politicians. So why or how has this consensus come about? What has constructed it?
Yeah, it's a difficult question, because we in Germany also don't know so well why there's such a high agreement, but there is this high agreement. This is the reason why all parties now agree on the Energiewende. This has been different in the past, where the Conservative Party was against it. But right now, because of all people want to have the Energiewende, the energy transition, they all support it. But it's questionable, though, how we can do it. But you are right. A lot of people saying we need to be more effective and also be more fast than we do it right now. And that's not happening. And the politicians are not really doing well in this respect. We have to admit. I mean, they could do much better, but they don't. And this is what the people feel and see, and there's a mistrust always against the government in Germany because they don't really believe what they are doing, but they believe in what they want to do. And we have a strong associations right now. We call it the Bürgerenergiewende, the population energy transition. There are a lot of people now, 1 million people already engaged in these kind of alliances to go for windmills, to invest into solar parks, to invest into biogas and all this. And they do that, and they spend their money there, and that's unstoppable. And this will continue.
Yeah. Maybe turning to Cameron, the UK reality is obviously very different, but also expectations are an important factor in economics, right? And could you give us a sense of, your perspective? Why is it so different? Why are the expectations much lower in the UK, even though on paper the actions actually may be relatively comparable?
Yeah, it's a great question and a complicated question. Expectations do matter enormously in economics and in markets. I mean, the share price of a company is, in some part determined by what people expect it's going to do in the future. So, you can shift the real economy quite substantially and prices quite substantially just by changing the way people expect the future to turn out. And, from John Maynard Keynes back and forwards, economists have tried to grasp with how these expectations are formed. He called them animal spirits, and they're just very slippery and difficult things to get a hold of. But as between the politics of the German Energiewende and what's happening in the UK, I mean, I think to some extent, classic political theory helps. There was a period, I mean, the Green voter in Germany is a bigger chunk, to be fair, than probably in the UK, and it probably sits closer to the middle. And if you've got median swing voters who have Green preferences, then you have both parties on either side competing to claim that agenda, to grab that median voter and to win. And I think probably the difference between the kind of coalition politics of Germany, where you need to build into account the views of other parties and to form your grand coalition, and what in the UK has been, until recently, a more first-past-the-post sort of system, has had an effect as well. But I mean, over here we did have a period of time when there was great consensus around this issue, and those of us who were concerned with environmental issues took the challenge, took the opportunity to enshrine in law the Climate Change Act that now makes it very difficult for one party or another to backtrack on those commitments. Nothing's impossible, but the resistance to turning dirty again in the UK is in law, and it does make it a bit harder. But it's a very good question.
So it's interesting, it's a very different way of handling a system, right? As I mentioned in the little talk at the beginning, is whether you do it top-down with a law and a strong rule, or you do it with bottom-up support. You get a very different outcome over the very long term.
Yeah, and I mean, I think if you try top-down, it just doesn't work in the long run unless you've got bottom-up support.
Yeah, indeed. So, David, I was curious, what's missing to galvanize public support for non-Germans?
Well,
how do they work?
There are good news. So at least quickly talking for Switzerland, it's all kind of a pitch, is that it has been decided 2020, 20% reduction carbon budget of the company, second period of the Kyoto period protocol. That's all in the law, and will happen there. For me, the key thing is how you frame the conversation, how you frame this whole challenge. And I think what we've seen and what we can really learn from Germany, the ability to frame it as a true question about leadership and where you want to be, and not a question what you're going to lose. And that's the key thing, because I would agree to the initial poll. It's in essence, in its depth, it's unknowable. But if you take a position, we can do it, has a completely different implication of what you in fact will achieve than if you say we're basically locked in and there's not much we can gain here. And that reframing of the conversation is absolutely key. And it's also important to I think Cameron mentioned it, the question about what will we be 20 years from now. I don't know what I will be in 20 years from now. So it's very hard to state my future preferences. But what I know, and politics can adhere to. I have a feel what is more aspiring to be and things that are not so attractive to be in. And if we try to bring that into the conversation, it's a completely different level.
Yeah. So we've not managed, in a sense, to create the compelling stories of maybe outside Germany of what that future would look like.
I mean, just a very brief piece. Yeah. Also, the Swiss piece moved mainly because of Fukushima. So we have to say the idea also to get out of nuclear was a decision which was long debated, never really taken on. And as a side remark, nuclear is not insurable, so we do not insure nuclear super events happening. It's beyond the capacity of our industry, for example. Tells you something about how you manage these risks. But you can still take them on as a society. Funny enough, we took them on in the 50s, probably for good reasons, because we had a bit of a discussion which system will prevail, and we're very happy that the system we allocate resources did prevail, I have to say so, honestly, and that means that technology was important at its time. Nowadays, would we be as brave as we've been in the 50s about the technology, we talk about nuclear, in terms of the Energiewende, we would already be there.
I just want to, as a wrap up, to come back quickly to cities, because that's the main theme of this. And there tends to be a great focus in these kinds of debates on the production of power and the various sources and options, because that's big stuff and somehow that captures people's interest. But as also Fatih Birol mentioned this morning, most of the sweat of the hard work is in things like insulation and in the buildings work, which is actually a much bigger scale thing than the power system side. And I was just curious to get all of your views on the impact of that, but not just what are the other impacts on cities? Does that make them more resilient? What's the potential social impact of that? Because when you start touching everybody's houses and offices, it's more than just a construction project, right? You get very close to the way our cities are structured and our communities are built. David?
Just a brief thought to start with. The internet is an extremely resilient communication network. Mm-hmm. Our power grids currently aren't, and the smart grids would be. And I think that's an element cities should deeply consider, and they do already. And I fear more that some cities might not be early on, and late adopters will have to pay. So that's why I'm very, very, very kind of, in that sense, optimistic. The leading cities will make it. And the leading cities will be the ones who put in also quite ambitious policies to forge action in that direction, because they will benefit over the short term even, not the really far long term.
Yeah, I think, I mean, this kind of grassroots movement we see right now in Germany with the Energiewende is also happening in cities. I'm coming from Berlin, and there are a lot of young people right now driving electric cars. These are the young people who drive those cars, because there's some kind of concept where you can have a car to go, and they use it. And you see there's a completely change of the whole lifestyle in the younger generation, and I think this will do a lot with the cities. This will change, for example, if we go towards more electric cars, it will change the noise level, the emission level, also the particulates, which will change. The improvement also of the quality of the city, and will become more attractive, also not only for younger people, but also for the others. And there will be a change. I mean, the installation subject is also one which we see primarily in cities, but also in some rural areas, but this will change as well. But I see the strongest movement towards new technology also in the mobility sector, especially in the younger generation. I think that there will be a change, a completely change, especially in cities.
Cameron, and particularly the dilemma in this area, as always, is that there are always wonderful examples, but the question is how quickly can they scale up to be significant? Because this is huge, right? The scale, every building, every electron. So.
Yeah, I mean, we are going in the right direction. That's certainly true. I mean, it's not as if nothing's happening in this space, but you're right. It's not happening anywhere near fast enough compared to what the rate we need it to go at. I mean, cities are, for me, a beacon of hope in a way, because they are, like a lot of other things, they are themselves complex systems with emergent properties from many, many different interactions that happen, you know, in cities over a certain size. And if you think about the history of human civilization, it's the city that has been the organizing, you know, geographical thing that has driven our wealth and prosperity. And partly that's because when you bring humans together, they share ideas. And, you know, there's a US economist a while back saying that we'd run out of ideas and we're in for secular stagnation for decades to come. I think that is completely wrong. I mean, ideas beget more ideas, new technologies beget more new technologies because you can combine them more easily, and all of that process of innovation happens more easily when you've got lots of people living together and feeding off each other. So I think it's entirely plausible that we will have, as Claudia and David suggest, cleaner, safer, quieter, more enjoyable, you know, better and more vibrant living spaces, and that will reduce our carbon footprint and our environmental footprint as well. But Roland, as you say, it's not happening anywhere near fast enough yet.
Well, thank you very much. I think that's all we have time of. I would like to very much thank our panelists here, and also Cameron, and wish you all the very best in the next hours or days.
Thank you.
So thank you. Let's have a great applause for our panel. Thank you.